Good evening, I guess. It's evening for you guys there in Texas. This is TBrown, and I'm currently in Virginia Beach, waiting to get our car back so we can finally drive back home from spring break. We've been stuck in Virginia for a few extra days, but Professor Mann kindly let me do this as an alternative since I'm not able to be with you guys in class tonight. So not sure how well it will work, but I will do my best to go over my articles as quickly as possible and not ramble on. I had two articles. The first one, well, they both sort of go together, and I'll sort of frame them in the big picture of the questions we're talking about. First of all, obviously, we're talking tonight about Edward's minority and basically whether or not there was a big crisis of government, and did the government not just completely fall apart during Edward's minority. Obviously, there are some people that are going to say it did. Other people will say it didn't. My two articles particularly lend support to the argument that it did not fall apart, and also fit into the broader picture of whether or not Cromwell instituted a revolution in creating a new government under the Tudors. So I'll sort of look at the articles from that bigger perspective, maybe gloss over some of the details that Professor Mann hopefully can fill in if we need to. So the first article was about John Russell, who was the Lord President of the Western Counties after starting in 1539. Basically, it's a test case for how well the Henrician government was able to handle remote regions of his kingdom. Obviously, that was one of the problems of being the king, is you can't be everywhere all at once, and the further away a place is from where you are, the more difficult it is to keep things under control. So basically, they had problems up in the north, and they had problems up down in the west. So the author, who now I forget her name, I had just looked at it, Willen, I believe. Diane Willen, sorry about that. Diane Willen looks at the West. So basically, the West had been controlled previously by Henry Courtenay, who was the Marquis of Exeter and then was made the steward of the Duchy of Cornwall, apparently because Henry didn't trust him to be the actual Duke of Cornwall. But anyway, he was the most powerful person in the West, and sort of administered it for Henry for about 30 years, up until, unfortunately, by 1538, Courtenay had accumulated a lot of money. It's estimated that his income was about £3,000 a month. And also had royal blood. So Henry at this point still does not have his male heir in 1538. He's very worried about someone trying to take him out and take over as king. And the most likely person to do that would be Courtenay, at least in Henry's mind. So he decides Courtenay has to go, has him executed. So this creates a problem because Courtenay kept everything peaceable in the West, and now they need a new person. But Henry, at least according to Willen, did not want to just create another Courtenay, which he would have done if he just appointed a new noble. So what he did is, instead of taking an existing noble, he created a new peerage and picked someone who had acquitted himself very well as a gentry, from the gentry within his court, and that was John Russell. So he made him, and actually Cromwell stepped in and created a new office called the Lord President, and created a new council called the Council of the West, which was intended to function as basically as an extended Privy Council to provide the same service in the locality of the Western counties. So this was an invention of Cromwell's. Basically, we can probably assume that the decision to pick John Russell was Henry's. The decision to create the office in the council was Cromwell's, based on what Henry wanted to do. So that's what they did with their new plan, so that they wouldn't just create a new rival to Henry. So Russell also serves as an example of answering the question, could someone come in through the court and advance themselves? In Russell's case, clearly he did it quite far. So on to what Russell did. Basically, he had a very hands-off, salutary neglect approach to the West because he had other stuff he had to do. He had been the Lord Privy Seal at one point in time, and was also the Lord High Admiral. So he had other responsibilities that kept him in court and kept him from being present and convening his council in the West, which eventually created problems. Eventually, in 1549, some injustices have built up, particularly around the enclosures movement, where people are losing common land, and eventually they get really upset. And during this time, because Russell has been away on other business, basically the only time he's shown up in the West is when he needs to pick up some troops to go fight with France or somebody else. So they don't necessarily have a high opinion of him, but he's at least cultivated enough relationships that he does have a base of support, which will be important later. Anyway, in 1549, there's a big revolt. He finally shows up, and as I said, he did have some support and was able to camp out in the city of Exeter and put together enough of an army that he was able to put down the rebellion. So there are two different ways to look at this. Either you can say he did a poor job because he let the rebellion occur, which might be fair, but some of the circumstances were out of his control. Another aspect of the West that was different is that they were much more conservative, so they got more upset about the changes to the Catholic liturgy in the new prayer book than other areas did. So already he was dealing with a more hostile environment religiously, although again, probably you could say that in that case he probably should have recognized that, and in that case been more present, which he was not. So he can be blamed for not being around enough. But point being, once he gets there, he actually does a good job, and this is basically Willen's conclusion, is that once the crisis occurs, Russell is able to adequately use the council, and once he starts using the council that Cromwell had created after the revolt, he's able to do a much better job, and it works out very efficiently in helping to keep peace and stability in an area that is distant from London. So overall, you can look at it, while there was a minor crisis, and this depends on how you define a crisis, but once there was a problem, the government worked effectively in fixing the problem, and once they started using the tools that Cromwell had created, specifically the council and a better physical presence, then they were able to do a much better job of keeping things stable. So overall, Willen would say that there was not a complete breakdown or major crisis, at least out in the West, under Edward, because of the presence of Russell as the Lord President. So on to the next article. I'll try to go through it quickly. It's about Northumberland. Obviously, as the title says, it's by Dale Hoak, and he's going to rehabilitate the Duke of Northumberland. So the question is, what does the Duke of Northumberland need to be rehabilitated from? A few things. Basically, he set up a coup and kicked out the Duke of Somerset, who was the Lord Protector at the beginning of Edward's reign after Henry died. Edward the Sixth, I want to say. So he was in charge of basically running the kingdom under Edward the Sixth, but did a very poor job. I'll get back to that in a minute. So Northumberland gets a bad rap for organizing the coup, kicking him out, getting Somerset eventually executed, and also trying to slide his daughter in, or his son in, who was married to Lady Jane Grey, to try to get them to cut to the front of the line to be king when Edward the Sixth dies. So he gets a bad rap for that also, and probably legitimately so. But we'll get to that. So what Hoak points out is that because of the things he did that we didn't like, and again, this is us in the 20th century or 21st century now, with a different moral setup, that we are overly critical of him. So basically, Hoak says that while he might have used underhanded means to get rid of Somerset, the result was good because Somerset needed to go. Basically, Somerset had not done a very good job of administering as Lord Protector, and a lot of the problems that had cropped up were Somerset's fault. Most specifically, he committed the cardinal sin of running out of money. He hadn't done a very good job of administering finances, mainly because, at least according to Hoak, the Duke of Somerset did not like to delegate. So he kept most of the power to himself, and did not put the money, did not entrust good money people with the money. And since he wasn't good with money, basically the crown ran out of money, and that's one of the main reasons that they were not able to adequately address the problems that cropped up. So Somerset needed to go, and Hoak also points out that basically Northumberland takes the blame for organizing the coup, but basically everyone else on the council who had all been appointed by the Duke of Somerset was in agreement. So Northumberland had complete support. Everybody wanted Somerset out because they knew that that was what was best for the realm. So it wasn't necessarily a power grab on the part of Northumberland for his own benefit. He just did what he had to do to fix the problems that Somerset had started to allow to occur. So basically, once Northumberland steps in, Hoak says he actually does a very good job. Most specifically because he does not commit two of the sins, if you will, that Somerset did. First of all, Northumberland realizes if he just takes over as the new Lord Protector, then he's probably going to make everyone else mad, and he'll end up in jail and eventually executed, just like Somerset. So he actually sort of creates a new protectorate council or something like that, where basically he sort of leads the council, but he's not officially the Lord Protector. They replace one person with a group, and he just sort of steers the group. So that kept him from getting too much animosity from the other people on the council and the other privy councilors. So that helps him out a little bit. The other thing that he does most significantly, as I said, Somerset didn't like to delegate. Northumberland does, or at least even if he doesn't like it, he does it because he realizes it's the best thing to do. Northumberland knew that he wasn't great with money either, and so he entrusts other councilors who are better at managing finances to handle the crown's money. The net result of that is that they are able to restore their income to the black. They fix a bunch of problems that occurred financially, and another nice thing, they actually get their own slush fund that the council can use to act quickly on matters where it's taking maybe a longer time for Parliament or the king to make up his mind about something. So they're able to be a little bit more proactive because they actually have some of their own money that they sort of shuffled away that just wasn't there because they were broke before under Somerset. So overall, big picture, Northumberland needed to get rid of Somerset for the benefit of the realm, and actually does a better job. So in the big perspective, Northumberland is an example of the Tudor government avoiding a crisis and functioning well, and being able to fill in and keep things running with a minor king who isn't ready to actually be kingly yet. A couple other things on on Northumberland. He does also get criticized for, again, trying to slide his daughter or his daughter-in-law in place of Mary, which again is a legitimate concern. Whether or not he did that, obviously he was probably selfish in wanting his grandson to eventually be the king, but also may have recognized that Mary was decidedly Catholic, and that was not in the best interest of the realm to go back into Catholicism. Northumberland does get criticized for sort of being a wishy-washy Mitt Romney type flip-flopper on religion, which he probably was. He's criticized, and we've mentioned it before in class, in trying to reconvert to Catholicism before he was executed. That was, at least Hoak thinks, that was more tactical than based on actual religious belief. He was simply hoping that if he went back to Catholicism and confessed, then Mary wouldn't chop off his head, which didn't work, and she did it anyway. Anyway, so big picture for Northumberland in this article is that his action in getting rid of the Duke of Somerset stopped and prevented Edwardian government from completely collapsing. So he would fall in the camp, as well as Willen, of saying, no, the Edwardian government did not collapse, and the councils functioned well in doing what they were supposed to make up for a weak king. So that's hopefully all I have. I imagine there's going to be some gaps I missed that Professor Mann will have to fill in, so I'll let him do that. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great week.